Welcome to Church for Skeptics, giving answers to the hard questions concerning the Christian faith. Your host and teacher is Dan Arsenault.
Hey, welcome to Church for Skeptics. We're here with Dr. Steve Cowan, and this is, if you're watching this program and did not see the previous program, this is sort of the second in a series where we're talking to him about the existence of absolute truth. Does it exist? Is there such a thing as reality? Dr. Cowan, we just were talking about, I think I want to start with this.
Okay.
The hardcore postmodernists says there's no such thing as reality. I'm not sure I can even get my mind around that. Can you explain what he means by that?
Well, the postmodernists, I mean the really serious postmodernists like Rorty and Derrida and others that we were talking about last time, they are what are called anti-realists. They say there's no absolute truth. Truth is whatever I want it to be. And of course that implies then that there's no absolute reality, that reality is whatever I want it to be. That my own language and my own culture and ultimately my own mind creates my own reality. We use the analogy of the movie The Matrix before the program. You know, in the movie The Matrix, there was at least a real world outside the Matrix that people could get into.
Right.
Well, the postmodernist says there is no world outside the Matrix, that we've all created our own Matrix, and that is reality for me.
So, in other words, there's no such, for the true postmodernist, there's no such thing as deception.
Well, there might be self-deception, but even that becomes kind of incoherent.
Yeah, that's what it seems like to me. If
Mhm.
I create my own reality, then it doesn't. I can't be deceived because whatever I believe is true for me.
That's right.
So there's no such thing as deception.
Mhm.
How does that play if I walk in front of a truck?
Well, that's where it gets kind of funny, because we were talking about the Buddhist last time.
Yeah.
The Buddhist has no real reason, if he's consistent, to look both ways before he crosses the street, but the same goes for the postmodernist. If I really do construct my own reality with the use of my own language and my own concepts, then there's no reason why I can't just imagine that truck down the road isn't there, and on postmodernist terms it would not be there. But of course that's ludicrous. Nobody really lives that way. An illustration I use in my classes is that postmodernists, when it comes to language and literature, they
Right.
believe that the meaning of a text is determined by the reader, not the author. And yet it's strange to me that a postmodernist, when he reads the label on a medicine bottle, lays that particular theory of interpretation aside and interprets that label in accordance with the author's intent. Otherwise he'd be dead.
So there has to be some motive behind their philosophy. It can't be like, this is what I really think. To me, it seems like that so many of these, I guess you'd call them, is it accurate to say, paradigm shifts in the way that the world thinks about itself are overreactions to abuses.
I think so. Postmodernism is, of course, a reaction against modernism.
Right.
And I think the last time I was on your program a few months ago,
Yeah.
we talked about the distinction. Modernists believe in absolute truth, but they also believe that scientists and thinkers, scholars can be absolutely objective, and that our prejudices and biases don't influence our knowledge claims. Well, of course, postmodernists are right to point out that the modernists are wrong about that. But they go to the opposite extreme then and say that because we can't be totally objective, there's no objectivity at all. And of course, what I would say is that we ought to find a middle ground between those views and say that even though we can't be totally objective, we can still have a measure of objectivity.
Here's another thing that I run into. It seems to me that very many people today, and I'm not sure whether this puts them in the postmodern category, would believe that there is an absolute truth on a physical level. They trust science. They believe, they sort of take I forget what the word is, scientist point of view, or scientivism, that real knowledge can come through science, and that's the only way that we can really get knowledge, because it's based on our physical observations, our physical senses. But they would not believe that there is absolute truth on a metaphysical level, or even that the metaphysical level exists. Can we say that if there's truth on a physical level, there's no reason to believe that there's not truth on a metaphysical level?
I think so. I mean, if you believe there are absolute truths, And of course, they have to be, because to deny there's absolute truth is self-defeating, is self-contradictory.
Why is that? Because people need to know that.
Well, here's what I do with my students. If someone says all truth is relative, which is the basic postmodern theme,
Right.
you should ask that person a question. You should ask that person, is that true? Is it true that all truth is relative? And there are only two answers to that question, yes and no.
Yeah.
If he says, no, it's not true that all truth is relative, then I would tell that person, why are you wasting my time? Because that's just your own subjective belief that I need not concern myself with.
Right.
On the other hand, if he says, yes, it is true that all truth is relative, then he's contradicted himself. He's saying that on the one hand, all truth is relative, and yet there's this one absolute truth. Right? So that's a self-contradiction. This view is self-defeating. It cannot be true.
Let me be the devil's advocate here.
Okay.
Could he make the case that there is one truth, only that all truth is relative?
Well, he can say that, but then
now
we need to ask him the question, what grounds do you have to limit our truth claims to that one principle? And I know of no argument that can do that.
Right. If that can be true, so can a lot of other things, I
That's
guess.
right. Well, what people often do, you're right, though, that people will argue that we can perhaps have scientific knowledge, but they will often be skeptical when it comes to claims about metaphysics or religion, morality, and things like that. What I would say to them, though, is that you may have you might try to be skeptical about metaphysical and religious truths and moral truths, but to say that we can't know metaphysical and moral truths is not the same thing as saying there are no metaphysical and moral truths, and that's an important distinction.
Yeah, we better repeat that. I think it's really important to
Well, it
to
doesn't
repeat
follow from the fact that it may be hard to figure out what's true in morality and true in religion.
Right.
It doesn't follow that there is no truth in those areas.
Right, the truth may be there, it just means that it's difficult for us to find
Then
that
we
out.
have-
And yet we
that's
would
right.
say, as Christians, we would say, no, it's not really that difficult, that we do inherently know some things about right and wrong.
That's right.
We inherently know that life has meaning, and we live that way for the most part.
Exactly.
Except some of those people there are people who seem to have given up. That's one of the impressions, by the way, I got in Europe, was that people have given up on ever finding meaning in life. Now they still, because of human nature, I think, they still try to be happy. And that sort of becomes the ultimate goal in life, to be happy. And of course, one of my favorite authors, John Piper, applauds that. He just says it's logical in our pursuit of happiness to include God in the process, since He's our creator.
Right.
And I think that's very true. Let's talk about responsibility and accountability.
Okay.
I think we've made a pretty good case on the last program and this program that absolute truth has to exist. That given that, meaning and purpose in life have to exist. Given that, that meaning has to be imposed upon us from the outside. If we're here for a purpose beyond ourselves, someone has to have that purpose beyond ourselves, and boom, there you go, there's God again. If there's a God, He has to hold us accountable to His purposes. Wouldn't He have to tell us what those purposes are so that we can be in accord with them?
I believe so. I believe that, and Christians have always believed that God reveals Himself. That the one who created the universe is not a deistic deity who stands aloof from His creation, but that He is intimately involved with His creation every day, and that He has revealed Himself in multiple ways. He's revealed Himself in nature and through conscience. We talked about this last time. He's revealed Himself in the Scriptures.
Yeah.
And of course, people may not just take our word for that. I believe there are reasons we can give for both of those claims. But nevertheless, that's what we believe, that the God who created us has spoken, as Francis Schaeffer put it.
Yeah.
He is there and He is not silent.
And it's interesting, in complete contrast to the Hindu idea, and I'm not sure that you could call what they believe as ultimate reality as God, but one of the names for Brahman is silence. And if there is an absolute reality that they call Brahman, one of the things they claim about him is that he has not spoken.
Exactly.
So you've got a definite
That's right.
dichotomy there.
That's right. Now, going back to the issue of responsibility, though, I mean, if it's even possible that God has spoken to us, then I can't think of any higher responsibility that a human being has than to invest at least some time trying to find out what God has said.
I think these are really, and I really appreciate the way you start with the main